Howdy, howdy, howdy. This is where I go live and say hello to the world. Uh, Mainly because I've got a bit of downtime where my family aren't here for the next sort of 3/4 of an hour or so. So I just thought now's the time to crack out a video and talk about the normal stuff I talk about, which is, whether or not God exists and all that kind of stuff. So I will just what am I going to do? I'm going to talk to you. Sorry, I'm just going to share with you some stuff here, which is that's what I'm going to share, but not just quite yet. So I'm not going to show that yet. I'm going to share that with you in a second. Right. Hello, welcome. My name is Jonathan M.S. Pierce. Welcome to another Atypling Philosopher video. Hello from the UK to Vienna, Austria. A city I've been to a couple of times whilst driving. I used to have a camper van driving around Europe. And of course, as you do when you drive into Vienna, you have to play Ultravox Vienna at top volume and probably annoy heaps of Viennese people who have heard that a gazillion times. But that's what I did both times I went to Vienna. Good times, lovely city, beautiful. There you go. That's my Vienna story. What am I going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to link it tangentially to, I've got this new book out, which is 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God. And I'm going to talk about an argument that isn't in there. So that's good. But could have been in there, but I didn't really realize this was an argument until I really felt this recently. And there was a couple of instances on social media where I just couldn't look at certain pictures that people had shared on social media and then realized I had a phobia and actually put a name to the phobia. That's a phobia that has been getting, I'd say, worse and worse. I've realized it more and more over the last couple of years, but hasn't really affected me most of my life. And I'll talk about that in a little while, as to how that came about. When I talk about what the phobia is. But what this talk is going to be is just quite a short talk, unless you want to add anything to the conversation and stretch it out. But a talk about phobias in terms of whether or not God exists. Now, the idea about anything really in the world, any kind of phenomenon is, is it more likely on atheism or theism? So this is the inference to the best explanation. So when you look at all sorts of, and philosopher Paul Draper has talked a lot about this, which is, any kind of phenomenon, you have this. What's it more likely under? This happening, is it more likely under theism or atheism? And this is generally where you get with the problem of evil. Okay, you can provide. So what is a problem of evil? Problem of evil is, why is there so much suffering in the world, given that God is supposedly all-knowing, knows what to do about it, all-powerful, has the ability to do something about it, and all-loving, cares enough to want to do something about it. So why is there so much evil in the world? And so the theist says there might be a reason. I talked about this last time, talk about this all the time. So this is called the logical problem of evil, to say that, okay, suffering and evil seems to be logically incompatible with the existence of omni-God. So the theist then comes back and say, actually, it's not logically incompatible. There could be a reason why suffering happens. Even if I imagine the most incredible amount of suffering and evil in the world, it could be that there is a reason for that. And then the atheist has to kind of accept, okay, there might be a reason why all this suffering exists. But then they go, and this is where the evidential problem of evil comes in, which is say, well, fair enough, but probabilistically, what does it look like? I mean, is it more likely that this massive amount of suffering takes place in a universe that is created by an all-loving God, where this creation is the overflowing love of God? Or is it more likely explained, or is it better explained in an atheistic paradigm? So when you have, and then this is one I always mention, 240,000 people dying in a tsunami, like the atheist can easily explain that, because you've got plate tectonics, which is how you know how we understand the construction of the world, and that causes earthquakes, which causes tsunami, and it's explained in a very sort of scientific way. And then that causes loads of deaths, and we don't need to explain that in the light of this notion that the world and that the universe needs to be fair. This kind of, it's called just world theory, the idea, and we all have it intuitively. And I've talked about this. I did another video on this, so you can check that out on just world theory. This is the idea that we feel that the universe should be fair because we have this kind of sense of fairness built into us through, evolutionary mechanisms. Because it helps us be a social species. But what happens is it kind of misfires because we look at the whole universe and we say, and therefore the universe must be fair. I believe in fairness. I have fairness built into me, this sense of fairness. So I sense that the universe must be fair. Hello to people just joining in. But of course, the universe isn't fair. It's why you have people that say, "Oh, it happened for a reason." Don't worry, it happened for a reason. Oh, my aunt's got cancer. Don't worry, it happens for a reason. No, it doesn't. What's that reason? Why would my aunt be being used? My aunt doesn't have cancer, but why would she be being used as an instrument for some other reason? But it's the way that people understand and justify really horrible things happening in the world. Oh, that tsunami happened for a reason. Really? But that's how they explain why there can be such untold amounts of horror in the world. Well, I would explain that myself just by saying, shit happens. The universe doesn't care about justice and fairness because the universe doesn't care because it's not an entity that can care. We care, but the universe doesn't care. So we can explain pain and suffering very easily under atheism. But every single, and again, I belabor this point very often, every single unit of suffering, whether it be stubbing your toe or tsunami or cancer or genocide, if you believe in God, has to be explained in light of an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God. And that becomes really, really difficult. And because there's no clarity, there's no revelation from God that explains each of these ones, you just appeal to some kind of like skeptical theism, some kind of unknown idea, that God must be all loving, and therefore there must be a reason that this happens that can explain God's all loving nature and this evil and suffering taking place. Okay, right. So that's the basis. So that's what the theist does, and they appeal to a logical possibility. Okay. So this is the possibility ergo probability argument, which is it's possible, is conceptually possible, logically possible. Yeah, but is it probable? And they jump from possible to probable, and therefore that's the reason. But actually, when you say what is the reason, they go, well, I don't really know the reason, but there could be a reason. So it's this like mysterious a reason. There's a reason why suffering could happen. And then I return to, well, okay, fair enough, but what's more probable? Because if you're going to have to jump through the hoop every time there's a bit of suffering, or every time you see this, and even every time you see other things like evolution as a mechanism, what's that more likely under, theism or atheism? You start seeing all these things around the world. You start seeing the fact that, okay, different religions exist geographically, and they look like they're born out of cultural, different cultural contexts. Is that better explained by an all-loving God that wants everyone to enter into a loving union with that correct God? Or is it better explained by atheism? Okay. So all of these different kind of arguments, I think Paul Dredd has it spot on, where it's like the inference to the best explanation. This is abduction. These are abductive arguments. So what I wanted to talk about today is another abductive argument. Let's just see what Dustin has to say to this. Thank you for the chats coming in already. So some will say that God is sovereign, and when he's in God mode, he can do what he will and isn't subject to our moral framework. This is quite a common, you're quite right. Some do say this. And I would say it's a massive cop-out. So I've literally come across... So one argument, and I've made this video as well, the argument that God loves abortion. So there's something like 2/3 to 3/4 of all fertilized eggs fail to implant, or if they do implant, then they fail in some way throughout the pregnancy, from the beginning of the implantation process right to birth, right? So if 2/3 to 3/4 of those die, and you believe, as a theist, you believe that they become ensouled, that they've got souls. So you're arguing that humans shouldn't be doing abortion. Well, actually, God allows and designed into the framework spontaneous natural abortion to the tune of millions a year, billions over time. So the theist comes back quite often. I've had this argument with theists, and they come back and say, well, God has a sovereign right to do that. Same with kind of genocide, same with anything. God has that right. God created. It's like, really? So you can create... So if I was a scientist in a lab, I could create a sentient life form with feelings and emotions, and literally I could say I created from nothing this human being in the lab. Say, I've created you. You're this human being that can feel and that can love and that can feel sadness and pain. And now I'm going to torture you over a period of time and then kill you, or allow you to die, or however you want to frame it. I have the right to do that. I'm not sure that confers a right to me. So I have a real problem with that. And in the other part of what Dustin says here is, like, God's not subject to our moral framework. And some people say God isn't a moral agent. He has no moral obligations and duties. I'll have to make another video on that, because I disagree fundamentally with that. There's a huge problem with that. But anyway, back to my actual argument about phobias. So it's an abductive argument, which is say, here's a phenomenon that exists indisputably. So there's no argument about the phenomenon. Is it better explained by atheism or theism? And the argument here is phobias are better explained by atheism than theism. And I would have included that in this book, but I hadn't really experienced it fully until really, really recently, when I realized I've only got one phobia. And it's not crippling, but actually it is... I hate it. It's horrible. And the phobia is something called trypophobia. And I only understood what it was and what it was called until very recently, when someone posted something on Facebook that I was like, I've got that. And I first understood that I had this actually when I was a kid, and I saw someone open a pomegranate. And inside the pomegranate, you've got all those pips, those sort of bumpy pips, all sort of regularly arranged. And I was like, ugh. And as a kid, I was like, ugh, I don't like that. But I haven't really thought about that until the next time I think I experienced it. I think maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years ago, I was cooking some macaroni, small macaroni in a pan, cooking some macaroni pasta for my kids. And I'd left the pan and went away, and I came back, and as I'd left it, the water got less and less, and all the macaroni stood up on end, and they were all pointing up at me. And I looked down, and there were all these holes arranged in the macaroni, and I was like, oh, that's horrible. And I was like, oh my God, that's weird. I don't like that. I've got some visceral phobic reaction to that, as in it's kind of irrational. I have no apparently good reason for feeling like that, but that disgusts me in some quite visceral way. And I reacted quite... Anyway, again, didn't really think about that. And then there are certain things that I've seen since then where I've like, oh, that's disgusting. I don't like that. And I think I've realized that I've got this phobia of kind of holes, arranged holes, or maybe even sort of bumpy surfaces or whatever in certain ways. And it's actually got worse and worse. And now when I see things, and I'm going to show you some stuff in a second, that literally physically makes my brain fizz. And in fact, it's doing it now. I've got tingles at the whole back of my head just thinking about it, because I know what I'm going to show you. And I hate it so much that it makes my brain fizz. And sometimes that goes on and on and on for like some time. After I've seen it, like I can't stop thinking about it, or my brain is just fizzing and incapable of doing the normal kind of functioning. So it'd be interesting to see how I cope with talking about this for the rest of the video. But anyway, let's talk about the phobia first. Well, no, let's show you some pictures. I'll show you some pictures first and explain my phobia. Right. So this is my phobia. And it is called trypophobia, and it is a phobia of loads of small holes or bumpy surfaces in this way. And these pictures absolutely disgust me. I can't. I'm gonna look at them, but I can't. Like that there, it just is disgusting. Yeah. That is really difficult for me to look at. Oh my goodness, I hate it. And there's a pomegranate. There is, I think, the first instance of doing this. But actually, so I think one of the ways of curing yourself is like with a lot of phobias, seeing it a lot and just normalizing it and getting over it. So actually, my brain is not fizzing as much as it has done over the last few weeks when I've sort of looked at these, because maybe I've looked at it quite a lot, and now I'm looking at it over and over. It's more normalizing, and my heart rate's probably coming down a bit now. But there are certain manifestations of these things. So I remember, like, someone put on a picture which was a statue made of holes of parent child. So this is what sent me off on one the other day. I wonder if I can find it. Yeah, this one. This set me off the other day. So someone put this lovely picture on Facebook, and they said, "Oh, this statue is made of the son was made from pieces removed from the statue of the father, representing what parents do to build the child's lives of their children." And I put on there, I can't stand that statue. I can't look at it. It's disgusting. It is really triggering my phobia, and and I had a real problem with that. And it's really harsh because someone had put this lovely sounding, like, whole idea of the statue is lovely and it's supposed to be one of these motivational things on Facebook, and I just went, "That's freaking disgusting. I don't want to look at it. Thank you very much. You've triggered my phobia." But I just found it quite interesting that I had this phobia, and so let's have a little look to see what could be the basis of this. So, and I'll just read you Wikipedia because it's easier, and there you go. So, trypophobia is an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. It's not officially recognized as a mental disorder, but may be diagnosed as a specific phobia if excessive fear and distress occur. Most people mainly experience disgust, but not fear when they see trypophobic imagery. A minority of people experience the same level of fear and disgust, and a few express only disgust or fear. So for me, it's probably disgust, but it actually causes my brain to go really funky and fizzy. Now, there's not a lot's been known about this because it's only relatively recently that people have kind of started to understand this more and look into it. But the understanding of trypophobia, as I'm reading here, is limited. Several possible causes have been proposed. So one is an unconscious reflex reaction based on a biological revulsion rather than a learned cultural fear. Imagery of various venomous animals, for example, certain types of snakes, insects, and spiders, have visual characteristics similar to trypophobic imagery. Because of this, it is hypothesized that trypophobia has an evolutionary basis meant to alert humans of dangerous organisms. Another theory is, just further down here, researchers have also speculated that trypophobic reactions could be perceived as cues to infectious disease. Just intuitively, I think this is probably slightly more probable, which could be alerts that give one a survival advantage. In a study by Kupfer and Ley, trypophobic and non-trypophobic participants showed significant aversion to disease-relevant cluster images, but only trypophobic participants displayed a significant aversion to disease-irrelevant cluster images. And other people stated that because the reactions could not be attributed to different sensitivity levels or neuroticism differences, they believe it supports their hypothesis that trypophobia is an overgeneralized aversion towards cluster stimuli that indicates a parasitic and infectious disease threat. And it could be due to the imagery's visual similarities to skin diseases. So my point of showing that is that we can explain this, or at least even if we don't know 100% why that happens, the whole mechanism of evolution gives you a framework within which it can be explained and should be explained. And even though you might not be able to test and know indubitably or really thoroughly why that phobia might be, the theories that you can propose are coherent and they make sense. And in fact, we're drawing from how phobias work in other contexts and what we know. So there are lots of phobias in the world, and we can explain pretty much all of them in terms of one mechanism or another, and they're usually to do with understanding of evolution and why these things would freak us out, particularly if they're sort of visual stimuli that give us these phobias. So the point being that for me, that satisfies me. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I can see the disease element of that. I can see the similarities between these kind of visual trypophobic images and certain diseases of the skin or whatever. And I can see why that that might trigger in me a reaction that is bad because disease is bad and I want to stay away from disease. And actually that would there's an adaptive advantage to seeing images in that way, and it's just overstimulating me. But yeah, that makes sense. The problem is, if I'm a theist, and particularly if I'm a theist who denies evolution, that makes no sense. Like, not just that phobia, but phobias in general make no sense, because they're saying God has designed the universe and knowingly designed the universe such that human beings have a whole range of phobias that are in some cases are completely debilitating, but in most cases, or all cases, because that's the nature of phobia, cause distress. There is distress generated by having a phobia and experiencing that phobia. So what this then becomes is another instantiation, another manifestation of the problem of evil argument. But it's yeah, so same. But it's another abductive argument, which is say, okay, this version of the problem of evil argument, the phobias in and of themselves, are they more probable on atheism or theism? And I would have to say clearly it's going to be atheism, because again, to explain them on theism, you're going to have to jump through hoops. Like, if I'm a theist, put yourself in a theist position here. Like, I have to sit there and go, okay, right, what could be the reason why God would design humans so that they could have phobias, where those phobias can be completely debilitating? And in fact, on that Wikipedia entry, there's a connection between OCD and trypophobia. So imagine having like an OCD kind of disposition where you are just completely debilitated. And I know some people who have really bad OCD or of people, friends' son can't leave the house due to OCD. So, for fear of this and that, and the condition being completely overwhelming. So, if I'm a theist and I'm sitting back and say, right, I've got to explain this under God, it's like, I'm never going to come up with a convincing reason. I'm never going to come up with a coherent, really even remotely obvious reason, because there is no remotely obvious reason as to why God would design that into existence. Because if I were, and especially when you get these theists to say, oh, God just has overflowing love, that's why God created the universe, because he has so much love that just his cup overfloweth. Yeah, but does that look like overflowing love? Phobias. of the whole range of phobias. And no, just no, it doesn't. So although this isn't on its own going to defeat, the existence of God as an argument, it's just another nail in the coffin where you're saying that it's just more likely that phobias exist on atheism than theism. Because all you're going to do as a theist is yet again appeal to skeptical theism. All you're going to do is yet again say there might be a reason. And I'm sorry, but the fact that there might be a reason is not good enough. It's not good enough for me. It's this consistent appeal to this complete lack of clarity from God. The all these horrible things. I remember when I wrote my book, one of my early books, Little Book of Unholy Questions, right? It's where I wrote 500 questions to God, and I can tell you categorically she's never answered any of them. I arranged the questions into different sort of chapters, problem of evil, heaven, hell, resurrection, prayer, Jesus, all these different chapters where I just ask these sometimes irreverent questions, which are just like tongue-in-cheek questions, but and silly questions sometimes, downright silly. But in those silly questions, there's always an element of like, actually, there's a bit of thought, in answering this or considering this. There's a little bit of theology going on here. There's a little bit of philosophy of religion. There's a little bit of thought. So I love that. And yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that. Damn it. There's my MS brain. So if you guys can tell me what I was thinking about before I was going to mention this, because in there, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. I don't know who I'm thanking because I don't believe in God. Thank you, my brain. So in that, one of the almost like thought experiments I bring up is about punishing, and it's to do with the problem of evil, which is to say that if my child goes and stamps all over some flowers, she just goes and stomps on someone else's flower bed, right? I pull them away. As a human being, I would reveal to them why that's a bad thing and punish them, connecting their action with the punishment. So if I say to my child, you've just done that, you've stomped on their flowers, that's really bad. This is why it's bad. And I'm going to punish you in this way, right? I'm not going to take you to the amusements now or whatever, right? Because you've done that thing on purpose and I told you not to and you've gone and done it or whatever. The idea is that when we punish children or people in general, we connect their actions with the punishment. And the whole process is in order that they don't do it again. And maybe that other people learn not to do it again because they don't want that punishment. So it all makes sense. The problem with God is that when we have this evil, where we appear to be getting punished for something, or something bad's happening, if God's not telling us why that's happening, then it just makes no sense. That is like me seeing my child stomp on these flowers in a flower bed and then beating my child for the next week and then giving them cancer, but not telling them why. Just going, I mean, I know why. It's because they stomped on the flowers, but I'm just going to beat them for a week and give them cancer. And my child's going to be like, why has all this evil just happened to me? Why has this happened? Why is my father doing this to me? Why would you do this to me and not tell me what you're doing it for? I was just living my life and now I've been beaten up for a week and given cancer. And the whole problem of evil issue is exacerbated by the fact that God is not clearly telling us why evil and suffering takes place. It's not good enough to say there might be a reason. Because, I mean, this is part of the divine hiddenness group of arguments, which is to say that, yeah, there could be a reason, but if God is not telling us that reason, then that in itself is a form of evil. If we're having to, and this is an interesting set of arguments to say that theodicies, which are theists' way of defending evil and coming up with defenses for why there is evil and reasons, is in itself morally bad, because what you're looking to do is excuse and justify things like genocide and cancer, like all the most horrible things in the world. The theist is looking to justify, and that in itself is a morally dubious thing. It's like seeing the Ukraine war at the moment, or the genocide, or My Lai in Vietnam, or Cambodian genocide, Tutsis and Hutus in Rwanda, and saying, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at how this can be a good thing. That's what theists do. It's like, how can this be a good thing? Let's think up a reason that could justify. I can't disbelieve in God. I can't believe that this genocide could just be gratuitous evil. Therefore, I've got to try and justify it. And it's just, what? I mean, to me, it's like, this is a real problem. It's a real problem. I don't need to justify it. I can explain it. I can explain it in terms of human activity and human nature. And I can explain tsunamis in terms of plate tectonics. But in terms of a loving God, I can't explain that. And appealing to this, there might be a reason. It's not good enough. It's not good enough for me. So there you go. There needs to be clarity. So let's bring it back to phobias. So if we got phobias, why have we got phobias? Why is there this suffering and evil, God? Just tell us. If you can give me a good reason for why that exists, then fair enough. Brilliant. That's a good reason. Okay, fair enough. I'll get on and just carry on through my phobias, knowing that there's a good reason, but and understanding it in the context of that reason. But to just not tell us anything, and to have other humans say there must be a reason why that exists because of, in light of God, is incredibly weak. That's my opinion. So let's have a little look at what some of you are saying. We have I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God. Jealousy is a human characteristic. I mean, this gets onto a whole other argument about, again, going back to evolution. So again, the whole phobia thing can be understood in terms of evolution. Can evolution be understood in terms of God? I think it weakly can. I don't think it's I think it's a problem. In fact, this is another argument that I think Paul Draper uses, and possibly Graham Oppie, that evolution is much better predicted by atheism and not by theism. And you get all these things like pain and pleasure, which are not connected to morality, but connected to evolutionary goals. Again, why would God create pain and pleasure to not correlate perfectly with moral bad and moral good? Why can we get pleasure from doing things that are morally bad and pain from things that are morally good? That's a bit weird, but we can understand it in terms of evolution, but not in terms of God. So all of these things, how do we understand them in terms of God? So in terms of God, and as Richard here says, jealous God. I wrote a piece based on a chapter from one of John Loftus's books, looking at emotions in terms of evolution. So anger, happiness, jealousy, all these things we can explain in terms of evolution, like what advantage that we get from having these emotions in terms of our evolutionary history, why anger might be useful, why indignation, why even shame and guilt and these things in a social species, they have a place, and happiness and all these other things. So if God is jealous, like if a human's jealous, I can understand that in terms of human nature and in terms of evolution. But if God is jealous, if God has no physical body that certainly wasn't the product of evolutionary pressures, then God's jealousy makes no sense. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that in. Let's see what else people have to say. This is going back to the punishment side. There's no chance of changing the person if you don't explain why you are correcting their actions. Exactly. So punishment should be about, and it's part of this is connected to free will argument, but there are three aspects to punishment in terms of crime and punishment. You've got rehabilitation, retribution, and deterrence. So deterring someone else from doing a crime. Retribution is like, you deserve that. It's your just desserts. And then rehabilitation, I'm going to punish you in prison, but the idea is that you're going to come out of prison eventually, and we don't want you to do it again. Recidivism rates need to be lowered, which is your reoffending rates. They need to be lower. So we need to rehabilitate you to make you a better human, so that when you exit the prison, you don't commit this again. Now, none of those things are really understood, apart from maybe retribution. But if you don't know what you're being punished for retributively, then even it just makes no sense. If there's no clarity in communication as to why you're being punished, Dustin's exactly right there. Then, you can't correct their actions. You're not even really correcting anyone else's actions, because no one knows. A tsunami killing 240,000 people. We're left thinking, what did we do wrong? We don't even know what did we do anything wrong? Are they getting punished for something? Like, are they getting punished? What do we learn from this? That God's really retributive and doesn't like them so much he's going to kill pretty much everyone there, including all the really nice people there. I mean, that was like whole communities wiped out and ecosystems full of animals. What do we learn from this? And of course, it fits much better with atheism and theism, because there's no clarity to anything going on under theism. And again, Reese says here, back to the previous point, not just a human trait. I can't make sense of an infinite being jealous. Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. Because, of course, as Richard retorts, I maintain that God was created by mankind, not the other way around. So God is made in our image, not us in God's image. So there you go. And, yes, I mean, the example of the Hebrew Bible genocides, the Old Testament genocides, and it is really problematic. Genocides are terrible. I was reading about it it's not here, in Phil Zuckerman's book, What It Means to Be Moral. And he talks about understanding morality with atheism and secular morality making sense, and divine command theory and other sort of divine moral value systems not making any sense. But he says, okay, but there are genocides, and okay, humans are not very nice, but actually we're nice more often than we're not nice, and blah blah blah. But so there's a chapter looking at genocides and how to understand them in terms of secular morality. But he was recounting some of the 20th century genocides, and man, they are proper horrible. Just some of the things that people did. The Armenian genocide, what the Turks did to the Armenian Christians, was absolutely terrible. And you're thinking, well, those Christians, this is a divine hiddenness argument. Those are Christians. Where was their God defending them when the Turks and Muslim Turks were doing that in the early 1900s? Nowhere. God was nowhere. And they suffered for their belief. Is that better understood under atheism or theism? Better understood under atheism, humans can be horrible. Under theism, God had to allow that to take place without getting involved. And yet, in the Old Testament, God's delivering the genocides himself, or is doing things like getting involved in really minor things, like someone dropping the Ark of the Covenant gets zapped by God. Lot's wife looks around behind her, gets turned into a pillar of salt. God's getting involved all the time doing this and that. It's important enough in that. But you've got an entire culture, an entire society getting wiped out by other humans. And you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to leave that one. Yeah, there's an awful lot of pain and suffering going on there. Oh, that's horrible. That's really morally problematic. But, I don't think I do anything. You turned around. You looked around. I'm going to turn you into a pillar of salt. But genocide over there. Meh. Yeah, there you go. Oh, and they're Christians. Yeah. Oh, well. What? Again, what's more likely? Is that more likely is genocide more likely under theism or atheism? There you go. I think it's tremendously problematic. Again, I don't want to. Again, this is the point I keep banging on about. According to the Bible of Fables, evil Satan was created by God. If you saw my recent post, this is not to talk about phobias or anything, but this is me reacting to your comments, and we're just having a nice little chat. And when I say we, I mean I'm clearly talking to myself with electronic words at the side. But that is representing real people. So this is a conversation. The other day on Only Sky, sorry, I'm utterly wittering now. On Only Sky, where I wrote an article on a very topical piece that's blown up locally here, which is a local Catholic priest had a right old go at teachers and the Catholic education system as teaching about inclusion and use like gender ideology and trans and all this. Had a really un-English, not very British way of doing religion. We don't have that a lot over here. We don't have pastors going crazy. That's 10 a penny in America. Under here, it's very, very, very not, doesn't happen very often. But he went off on one about this. And part of this homily enraged about, and it was effectively either misinformation or disinformation. He got stuff wrong about what's being taught, and then creates this straw man of gender ideology that isn't there for everyone to get really, really angry about. And we had all these Catholics saying, what an amazing homily. Catholics from America seeing it on YouTube going, this is an amazing homily. It's like, no, it's not. It was A, morally despicable, and B, wrong, outright wrong. That's not what's going on anyway. But he was also connecting a load of it to the devil. His homily was like, the devil did this, the devil tempts you. And he seems to have a real belief, an actual belief in the real devil. And as I put on the YouTube video, as you do, can't resist, which is like I've said to you guys before, the devil, Satan, is God's middle management executive, right? If God is omnipotent, he can do anything. With the click of his fingers, you can get rid of Satan. So if Satan exists because God wants him to exist. So if Satan does anything and God doesn't stop Satan doing it, then Satan is doing it on the behest of God. In other words, Satan is just doing what God wants, either omissively, permissively, or actively. He wants those things, or he certainly doesn't want them not to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't happen. So anything that Satan does is done because God wants it to happen. So therefore, don't lay anything at the feet of Satan. It's all ultimately at the feet of God. So going back before my time, thanks for popping in, says it's difficult to understand why God has emotions without the biochemistry of the brain. Exactly. If emotions, as we understand them, emotions are in the same way that the mind is fully dependent on physical structures of the brain, then how do we explain emotions? And of course, people say, yeah, but you can conceptually imagine a mind without a brain, so you can imagine emotions. It's just like, okay. I think the problem is you just start inventing anything, unicorns. But I don't know, you can say anything about God if you can just, make stuff up. But I would agree that again it comes down to abduction, which is okay. Emotions might exist without a physical body, and they might exist outside of a paradigm of evolution. And minds might exist without a brain. Yeah, but what's more likely? Okay, so on and so forth. And I haven't read this yet, but let's see. Let's hope Dustin's nailed something. I think the reasons Yahweh commanded the Israelites to kill others, according to the authors, is because of their phobias of false practices. Brilliant. Nice. Thanks for linking that back to what we're actually talking about, Dustin. Yeah, it's just in-group, out-group psychology, tribal. It's just my God is better than your God. My God sanctions everything we did. So if we as humans killed the Amalekites, then that's going to get written down in our like national identity fable book as being sanctioned by God, and we'll start like intertwining God's agency in there as well. But there you go. Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Jonathan, for your wise thoughts. At least someone thinks they're wise on the subject of the God delusional thinking. Yes, the more I think about everything to do with God, the more nonsensical belief in God becomes. I've got to the point now where I just I can't believe people believe in this. And it is, of course, it's all psychological. But you get to the point where it's like, oh, come on, this is so ridiculous. Seriously? And I've got friends that hold on tenuously, and the start, like one of my friends who's been on this channel before, talking about their universalism. So sort of rejecting this idea of a heaven and hell notion of God and embracing universalism. Yeah, I can understand that. But but why any of it still? And it's because it conveys to them a sense of meaning. It's like rejecting theism for them is like there's no ultimate purpose. There's no transcendent purpose to reality. And I need that purpose. This is an argument from wishful thinking. Because I feel that I need this transcendental purpose. I feel that I need ultimate meaning through meaning that exists beyond my finite life, that exists eternally. And the only way I can get that is through God. So God has to exist. Therefore, the best way of understanding God, and God still being a moral agent or morally nice or whatever, is through a universalist understanding of God. So if God exists, there can be no hell that he's knowingly going to commit people to prior to even creating them. He knows he's going to commit them to hell. He creates them anyway. They go to hell. It's obviously malevolent. It's not nice at all. So I can understand why you do that, but I think it really just comes down to not being able to live in an existence where meaning is something that we have to create ourselves and is finite for us, because when we die, we die. I'm happy enough to think that. It's not a problem for me. Yeah, that's life. But I think for some people that's a real struggle. And so I understand why people want to believe in God, but I understand that it's hugely psychological and that actually they're being irrational, because on a probabilistic stage, there is no justification. I think there's no decent justification for belief in God. So yeah, I can understand why if you want that, then God is more likely to give you a transcendent meaning and purpose to life than atheism. Yeah, I'll grant you that. I just don't think that's a good reason to believe in God. And if that's really your core, if that's the basis of your belief in God, you've got to understand that to me looks rather like wishful thinking. Like if it's really, really important to me that I live in a meadow of pink unicorns forever, like if that's super important to me, I can't understand life without living in a meadow of pink unicorns. This is an reductio ad absurdum, which is a useful mechanism to say, right, let's take this to the logical extreme to show if the logic is the same and that's ridiculous, then your thing is ridiculous. So I'm saying I really want to live. I can't understand the existence of life without the idea of me living in a field full of pink unicorns. And the only way I can have that for eternity, the only way I can have that is a God. God is the only mechanism I can realistically get eternal field of pink unicorns. So therefore I'm going to believe in God, and I'm going to make that fit to all the other data. So the suffering and this and that, yeah, we're all going to go and live in a pink unicorn field or whatever. Yeah, that's ridiculous. I've just invented something I really, really want to be true. And I thought, well, the best way I can get that to being true is believing God existing. So therefore I believe God exists. And then I'm going to wrap that around every other bit of data in the world and try and make it fit. Nah, not having that. Not having that. Classic argument from Richard here. Just reading the Bible turned me into an atheist. I mean, a talking snake in the Garden of Eden. yes, they say the best argument against theism is the Bible itself, or the best argument against Christianity is the Bible itself. Completely agree. Made even worse, it's not just the a priori ridiculousness of a talking animal, of which there are several in the Bible, but it's the idea that it looks mythological. It's got all the hallmarks of a mythological tale. It's highly improbable and makes no sense of all the data we have, including evolution. But also, it's stolen from, or it's appropriated from the ancient Near East and other stories around. So the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Babylonian mythologies that involve tree of knowledge, that involve I think a talking snake as well, and involve a rib. There's a goddess of ribs that's involved in the Babylonian, mythology. So yeah, and there are these very obvious tropes that exist in these contexts that from which you can really understand the Garden of Eden story coming out, and even the name, the Garden of Eden, and where that name's actually come from, it looks to be a fertile plain near one of the rivers, near the Tigris, I think. Is it Tigris? That might be in Italy. Anyway. River around the Fertile Crescent. So there you go. I was just waffling on there, but the idea is that the Bible not only is full of obvious myths, but you can see the genesis of those myths from the context around which the Bible developed. And thank you, Richard. Your proper British accent makes you sound more authoritative, which is really interesting, isn't it? That so slightly tangentially connected to that. So the point here is who delivers information is often more important than the content itself. And my story that I often say is one of my friends who was a conservative Christian who. We used to argue all the time about evolution. I've told you this before, I said again. It took, I don't know how many years, 5, 6, 7 years of me presenting him arguments every month. We used to meet, and we used to meet most days. I worked with him. And we'd argue about evolution. I give him argument after argument after argument, and he wouldn't believe. But I must have sowed a seed. But anyway, he wouldn't believe. And then he sent an email to Simon Conway Morris, an Christian evolutionary biologist at Cambridge University, who emailed him back, and emailed my friend back with all the same arguments I'd been given for years. And then my friend believed. And it's like, hang on, you believe him? But I've been saying those exact same arguments for 7 years, and you haven't believed. And he says it in one email, and now you accept evolution. And that was a real eye-opener for me, which is why I always talk about psychology. Belief is about psychology. And if you want to disabuse people of ridiculous ideas, ridiculous religious ideas, you've got to understand what those religious ideas are doing them psychologically speaking, because you need to understand that so you can unpick that. Because when you're trying to convince them of the opposite to that, then if they have a functional use, you need to be providing them something with a functional use to replace that, or at least understanding the part that the content, the religious theological arguments content plays. Because this isn't just about, as my little stories told you, this isn't just about me presenting you with rational arguments and you going, oh yeah, really good arguments, I'm going to believe now. I'm going to believe in what you said because they are really good arguments. That's not how we work, sadly. We are not rational agents, and that's quite sad. Anyway, thank you. That's coming towards the end. This has been a short video, still approaching an hour. Thank you for all your support. If you have any last-ditch questions, any super chats, that's obviously appreciated. But if you have any questions, get them in now, because I'm going to be counting down to saying toodle pips. But I won't just yet. I'll give you a chance if you've got any more questions. And just to let you know that this book is out and it's shiny and it's available on Kindle, Kobo, and Nook. If you are like me, someone who doesn't want to give Jeff Bezos any more money, he's got quite enough. Kobo and Nook are good by me. But paperbacks available to order from any good bookstore, and obviously Amazon as well. You know, same problem there. Dustin, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you, Dustin. Always a pleasure to have your insightful comments. Same for Richard and all the rest of you. I'm your number one fan. Thank you so much. Oh, Stephen G. Clinard. Thank you so much. That's really, really very kind. Thank you. And that's super cool. And in fact, that's inspired me to just reel off to you the arguments that I deal with. I'm going to hopefully be doing a live stream this week with Derek Lambert of Myth Vision about this book, where we're going to be going through some of the arguments in there. But just to let you know, the sorts of arguments that are in here. So why would God create at all? A lot of these I've done videos on, of course, but it's just nice to lay it all out. Why would God create at all? God is a poor designer. This must be a perfect world. God loves abortion. God is morally culpable for our sins, and atonement is incoherent. Demanding payment for its own faulty design. Why don't we photosynthesize? I love that one. God has no free will. God and this world are immutable and unchanging. They can't change. The accidents of geography and history, unfair levels of evidence. Some people are still more likely to believe than others, and that's also unfair. Arguments against divine command theory. Humans do not have free will. The Bible is not a good source of morality. What holy books forgot to say. And that's always an interesting one. It's like not often what the Bible does say, it's what the Bible doesn't say. It's a classic of like, why didn't Jesus come down and say, slavery is really bad? By the way, slavery is really bad. Don't do it. Because I know the future. When I was incarnated in God the Father form, I know the future, and I know you're going to be even use the curse of Ham. You're going to use the Bible to justify slavery. Don't do it. I'm Jesus. And I'm literally telling you this. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are you listening? Right? Slate this one down. Slavery is bad. Don't do slavery. It's really, really bad. Okay, it's what the Bible doesn't say. It doesn't say that, and that's a problem. That's as morally a bigger problem as what the Bible does say in like genocide, rape, incest, or whatever. All these like dodgy things that are in there, they are a problem. But it's what the Bible doesn't say. You know. Oh, by the way, when you're doing surgical, do you know the guy that's the doctor that found out that you should wash your hands after he noticed that actually fewer people died in the medical profession, this is going back into the 1800s, died or got ill after if they washed their hands after doing a bit of surgery. So he then conducted his own experiment, found out that actually the data supported that, told everyone to wash your hands after doing surgery, and doctors and nurses should wash their hands. He got locked up for being mental. He got locked up in a mental institute because everyone thought he was nuts. Because they were like, no, we're not going to wash our hands. Like, what? It's insane. Anyway, completely random. But Jesus could have said, oh, by the way, wash your hands after you do a bit of surgery, and boil your tools and any implements you're going to use for surgery and all this kind of stuff. Sacrifice is really bad. You know, Jesus didn't say that. Didn't say any of it. Looks a bit dodgy. Was he really the Messiah? Was he really God? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, but there you go. Final few arguments in the book are: natural evil shows God's shadier side. Where is God hiding? The soul doesn't exist. What's the point of heaven and hell? God cannot be perfectly merciful and perfectly just. Weighing our hearts, heaven or hell. Explaining the heaven me. Free will, the problem of evil and heaven. Why not just create heaven? Satan is God's middle manager. Infinite punishment for finite crimes. Prayer makes little sense. Prayer is not effective. But God is not omni-God according to the Bible. And my bonus argument is God is not omniscient because it could be living in the Matrix. Do you know what was difficult about writing these? But Ethio, you may have missed the whole talk. That thumbnail is disturbing. It really is disturbing. I hate it. And the whole point was I've got trypophobia, and I absolutely hate that. Are phobias better understood with a belief in God or not, or under atheism. And I would say under atheism. You just I'm just thinking about it, and my brain started fizzing again. One thing about this book that was really difficult for me to do, and this is connected to something we talked about earlier about bodies and whatnot. I didn't want to call God he in this book, because God has no gender, has no biological sex. So God is not a gendered entity. So therefore, the best pronoun for God is it. And I went and I called God it in this book. Can I just say thank you so much again, Stephen? Really, really, really generous. And exclamation marks are always good. I can't tell you how difficult it was getting out of the habit of saying it instead of he. And then trying to make sense of certain sentences where there's a lack of clarity because of using the pronoun it rather than he, because you use it for an awful lot of stuff. And it's really difficult. And I hope I've got every sentence right in here. The most difficult thing about writing this book is making sure I called God it, apart from the passages I was talking about where God was countenancing rape of women and the subjugation of women in the Bible, where I was like, yeah, I think that probably deserves a he. But there you go. Anyway, that's what I talked about. That's the bonus couple of minutes of me talking, if you indeed think that is a bonus. Thanks to Stephen's very kind super chat. So thank you very much for your support. Really, really appreciated. As ever, question everything, particularly yourselves. And if you do grab any of my books, it really, really, really is deeply appreciated. All I do ask, if you like them, it's really important to whack reviews up on particularly Amazon for them. That's really important, especially if I get some Christian reviews that kind of always go for the 1 stars. So balances those out. If you don't like the books, just forget about it. Just no one needs to know. But if you really like them, thanks. That'd be awesome if you can review them. Really, really appreciate it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching and putting up with my blathering on about nonsense. Take care. Thanks for your support. And until next time, toodle pips.